First, I need to apologize for my English. It won't be as good as yours, but I'll do my best. I've had a lot of fun, and I think that if there's one thing I want you to take away from this is the best part about being an entrepreneur is it's fun, and it's challenging and can be frustrating, but it allows you to do things and feel ways that I don't know. For me, there's nothing like the thrill of taking something and making a business and watching, customers use your technology, developing employees. It's been my life. And I started my first company when I was 21. I started it on, this is true, on 2 credit cards, and I mortgaged my mom's house. So if I had gone out of business, my mom would have lost her only asset, her house. And I was successful, and when I sold my first company to a big company, I paid off my mom's mortgage, and she's never had one since. So, these stories about what it takes to build a company, it's true. And there are many people, there are many people much more successful than me, but it takes a lot of guts and a lot of hard work and passion to be successful in a startup. So, this is really why we created this company, Pivotal. It's a pretty amazing company. I believe we are the largest startup in the world. We have 2,100 employees. We're only a little over 3 years old. We do almost $300 million a year in revenue. We are working with the most important companies on the planet. And the reason we're a startup is that we took 9 acquisitions that were bought by 2 public companies, plus 1 internally developed project, and we spun them out into a new company. And it was one of the most interesting corporate development things I've ever done in my life. Think about the cultures that came from these 10 entities and how we built a company over the last 3 years. It's been just amazing. And we really, our vision is to transform how the world builds software. And as you'll see today, we have a very opinionated way to build software. And we really, over the 25 years that our CEO built this methodology, and watching what big successful technology companies like Google and others did with a platform, we basically created all of that and brought it essentially to large companies. And we work with some startups too, for sure. So this is great. I actually know this guy. He's a pretty famous dude, Jamie Dimon. He runs a little bank called JP Chase. And this is literally a quote. Silicon Valley is coming and they want to eat our lunch. And if you're a large enterprise, and you're running JP Morgan, who's one of our largest customers, Jamie Dimon wakes up every day worrying about people like you. He doesn't worry about Citibank and all these other banks. He worries about the disruption of fintech companies and how these fintech companies are changing the rules in his industry. And that's pretty exciting if you're an entrepreneur, because you have the most powerful person in banking probably worried about what you're doing in your startup. This is our CEO, Rob Mee. He's an awesome, awesome person. And he coined this term, which is really Silicon Valley is a state of mind. And one of the things that people always ask me is, I'm in wherever, I travel a lot. So, I'm in Singapore. Can my startup in Singapore be successful because I'm not in Silicon Valley? I want to assure you that people aren't successful in Silicon Valley because they happen to be at the GPS coordinates of Silicon Valley. They're successful at Silicon Valley because they've developed a way to work and think. And that is a mindset. And you can have that same mindset and be successful. And many companies have been developed outside of Silicon Valley in many industries as startups that have been wildly successful. You can look at Spotify here in Europe as an example, or Skype, don't let yourself feel like you can't be successful because you're in the UK. You have every opportunity, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So, there's a bunch of trends going on, and maybe in the Q&A we'll talk about it. But, today you can't build a piece of software if it isn't mobile and if it isn't connected, right? It just doesn't make sense. And, the cost of computing is nearly free. So, when I started, I'm 55, so I started my first company at 21, so I've been doing this a long time. It used to cost literally millions and millions of dollars to write a piece of software. Today, you can build the software for a few $100,000 and you can host it on a public cloud. And so, I mean, you have this unbelievable opportunity of innovation, and these cost curves are really in favor of startups today that they weren't, 20 years ago or 25 years ago. And the other thing is that the world's flat. I mean, everything is global. I mean, I'm on a 2.5 week, quick tangent, but a 2.5 week trip. And I have a rule that I don't check my luggage. So my biggest challenge over 2.5 weeks is to figure out how to clean my clothes, right? Because I refuse to pay my hotel to clean my clothes, because they charge £7 for my underwear. One pair of underwear, £7. I could buy a new pair of underwear almost for £7. And so in New York City where I was, it's easy, right? I mean, literally every other block, there's this fluff and fold, and you drop your clothes off in the morning, and at 5 o'clock you come back and your clothes are washed and your shirts are pressed, and it's fantastic. And it's, $20 for everything, So I came here and I said, okay, what am I going to do? I'm staying at a hotel, whatever, I don't half a block away, and I don't know this area well. I go on the net, I Google laundry and I Google shortage, and this thing called Laundry Heap comes up. It's unbelievable. I mean, I immediately go online, I sign up. This is Friday, okay? I get the last appointment. They come to my hotel. My hotel was not happy, by the way. They come to my hotel between 9 and 11 p.m. I leave my clothes with the concierge. I come back from a trip with the person who runs Europe for us sailing here in the UK, and my clothes are done. 14 pounds. 14 pounds. I did it all on the web. I mean, it was amazing. So, I mean, that is mind-numbing, right? I mean, it's incredible. And I didn't even know about the company until I Googled it. It came right up and I used it. So, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. And then the last one is really this ubiquity of sensors. So, I think this is a super interesting area. I'm sure we'll ask the question about, what do I think are the great areas? IoT, or this Internet of Things, is just amazing. We do a lot of work. We'll talk in a minute about the automotive industry. But, I mean, what you can do with these sensor devices and self-driving cars, and GE is one of our largest customers. So when you fly on an airplane, you think the jet engine is owned by BA. It's not. It's owned by GE. GE has zillions of sensors. When the airplane pulls into the gate, a network comes on, the sensors download, they figure out the state of the jet engines, they figure out what the likelihood is it's going to fail, they figure out when they have to do preventive maintenance, and GE gets paid basically on the performance of that jet engine. It's totally changed their business model. Their business model used to be, I'll sell you a jet engine. Now their business model is, I'll rent you a jet engine and you'll pay me based on the performance of that jet engine. So their revenues now are 60% software and services, where it used to be 10 years ago, it was 100% selling product. I mean, that's because of software. It's literally changing how big companies operate. I love this. So the world's largest taxi company owns 0 cars. The world's most valuable retailer has 0 inventory. The most popular media company in the world creates 0 content. And the world's largest provider of accommodations has 0 real estate. How is that possible? How many of these companies were around 20 years ago? None of them. This company is based in China. They're not all based, obviously, in the United States. It's because they changed the rules of their industry, and they changed it because of software. They wrote software that changed how users behaved, and they literally changed industries forever. So we like to think about the world as 2 kinds of companies: disruptors and transformers. And all the people in this room, you're disruptors. Your job is to disrupt industry. The transformers are mostly our customers. Those are the established companies, and what we're trying to do is transform them so they can behave like disruptors. So they can change how they think about their business model, how they think about building software, how they think about the experience of their customers. So I'll just give you a quick example in one industry. We work in a variety of industries. We're very successful in the automotive industry. But Tesla I mean, which has now become quite popular here in the UK too, it's an amazing company. And the summer before last, literally overnight, Tesla downloaded a piece of software for $2,000 and the car drove itself, literally. They didn't change one piece of hardware. They didn't change one sensor. Nobody had to take their car to a dealership to get fixed. They downloaded a piece of software and the car completely drives itself. If you're Ford or you're Mercedes, that's scary. I mean, that's super scary. At the same time, so they're competing on product, right? You look at Zipcar. I mean, Zipcar's competing on basically the business model, right? I mean, why buy a car? Just rent one. You don't need to own a car, right? Again, if you're General Motors or BMW, that's not good because the only way they make money is by selling you a car, right? And then probably my favorite is Uber, and I laugh because I have a 25-year-old and a 20-year-old and a 14-year-old, and they have all said to me, you know, the ones that drive, that they are willing to do a really nice thing for me. They'll give me back the cars that I bought for them if I give them unlimited use of Uber. Because they would rather use Uber, especially my daughter, than deal with the hassle of getting gas and having to worry about taking the car to be repaired and parking the car, you know, and worrying about, you know, having a parking permit at university. They would just love to use Uber. But this company and this experience is not only changing the car companies, it's changing the taxi industry. I mean, it's just dramatically changing how the world works. And all of that was done with software. All software. And these are all startups, right? These were startups just like you. So we work a lot with these guys. And by the way, I should say, and I'm not going to tell you which because I would get in trouble, but we actually work with two of those companies. I won't tell you which ones because they're super secretive and they don't like to, but we do work a lot with startups too, but the vast majority of our business is with these companies. And what we're doing is we're helping these companies basically become software companies. So I'll just go quick because I'm going to run out of time, but maybe most of you don't have Mercedes probably being in startups, but if you have a Mercedes and you use the Mercedes Me app, we built that app. So we built that software with Mercedes engineers in Palo Alto. So there was literally a Mercedes in our parking lot, and over about 4 months, we built the app and we downloaded it and saw what it did in the car. And now today, using our platform, which I'll talk briefly about called Pivotal Cloud Foundry, it literally updates millions of cars around the world and downloads software to those cars based on this Mercedes Me app. And we basically built a product called Ford Pass. It'll come here to the UK too, but it's basically a complete user experience around if you own a Ford that allows you to lease your Ford or rent your Ford to other people. It allows you to find places to park. It does all these really cool things if you basically have a Ford. And we've basically worked with the in-car system, the experience that you have in a BMW. We've helped BMW build that experience of the in-car experience. So we've done a bunch of work because these companies now are trying to compete with those startups. So just briefly, and you'll learn a bit about this, what do we think it takes to be successful, whether you're a disruptor or a transformer? It takes two things. You need a modern software methodology, which think of as agile. Think of it, in our case, as extreme agile, and you're going to experience it today. I mean, we have probably the most extreme agile process on the planet. It's been honed over 25 years. We were the first contractor Google ever hired, 15, 20 years ago. It's based on pair programming, literally. I mean, so there's two people, one computer, two screens. It's a very radical way of building software, but we really believe in this way of building software. And like I said, we do it for lots and lots of different companies. And then the other thing you need is you need a modern cloud platform. You need a platform to drop your software onto. And we are very fortunate that we invented the industry-leading cloud platform, something called Cloud Foundry. And in fact, in Frankfurt right now, the European Cloud Foundry Summit's going on. One of my jobs was to create the open source foundation that houses Cloud Foundry, and we have a commercial version called Pivotal Cloud Foundry that our customers use. And what Cloud Foundry really is something that we call a cloud native operating system, but it does all of the DevOps, and it basically allows you to deploy your software on any cloud in any environment at any time. And it's a very cool technology, and it allows you to do A/B testing so you can have two versions of your software and see how users are using the different versions of the software, and you never have to shut down your system to update your software. And so it's a really cool thing. And the reason I say it's the industry leading is because IBM, if any of you are on IBM Bluemix as an example, because a lot of startups use it, it's based on Cloud Foundry. If you use HP Hillian, it's based on Cloud Foundry. If you use, which you probably don't if you're a startup, but if you used HANA, SAP's technology, it's based on Cloud Foundry. So the industry has essentially adopted this technology as this cloud native OS. So this is my last, I think, thing, and then I'm going to jump into the startup stuff quickly. So, I mean, basically, this is a mind-numbing number if you're a large company. Basically, 75% of all application development that supports digital business will be built, not bought. Most large companies over the last 20 years have done two things. They've outsourced all of their development to other people. I was just with a major bank in Germany yesterday. They have 0 developers left. Not one. This is a massive bank. I mean, they've outsourced it all. They have, when I said to them, yeah, we can help you build software and be great, they're like, yeah, but we have one problem, we have no developers, okay? Left. I mean, it's just mind-numbing, right? It's like, I mean, that's what big companies did. They gave that away. And the other thing they did is they tried to buy packaged software. And what they've realized is, how do you differentiate yourself if everyone has the same software, right? The only way you differentiate yourself is if you build something different and unique, which is what all of you are doing here as startups. So to sort of summarize, and you're going to learn about this, so I'm just going to pass this. You're going to learn about our agile methodology, our lean methodologies for how we think about building products. We really focus on not a project, but a product. Everything is about these sprints and short periods of time and getting the product into the hands of the person who's going to use it like in 8 weeks and changing it and iterating it. And there'll be much smarter people in a little while talking to you about that than me. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the methodologies, and team is really important in what we do. So we have small teams of developers and UI designers and data architects and data analysts, and most importantly, a product manager, and they work in a small team to build software. And that's really the key to how this methodology works. So a bit about culture, and then we'll jump into the startup stuff. I mean, this is really more designed for bigger companies, but it's probably good that you think about what they're thinking about, because in many cases you're going to compete against them. What we tell big companies is they have to start trusting their employees, because big companies are so hierarchical. They're the opposite of a startup, right? They think all the decisions have to come from the top. But the problem is oftentimes the best ideas aren't at the top, and the top is not very connected generally to the customer. And that you really need to know what the problem is to build the solution. And so we really try to work on, and you're going to do a little experimentation around how you use ideas and generate ideas and take ideas from a concept to a real product. And then you need to have this iterative, continuous, short life cycle of building products, these sprints. It's really important. And then you just have to know that it's not just an IT project, it's an everyone project. So if you're a big company, what we tell them is, it's not IT's problem. It's the business and IT working together in partnership that are really going to create the solution. And then this is the one that's the hardest one by far, is you have to be willing and want and promote the notion of failure, which in a big company is tough. And I just want to say one thing to you as startup people, as a professional investor. I much prefer to back an entrepreneur that's failed than an entrepreneur that's never failed. Because I have failed massively, many times. And you learn humility when you fail. And you also learn what are your strengths and your weaknesses, and you learn about what you did wrong. And through that, I think you improve and become better. So, in a startup, failure is almost a badge of courage. In a big company, if you fail, sometimes they fire you. So we're really trying to change that mindset. Like if your people are afraid to try because they're going to get fired, then are they really going to push the envelope? So let's now talk about this VC stuff, and I'm going to blow through it pretty quick, and then we can do the Q&A. So how do VCs think about opportunities? And and this is my perspective. You probably ask other VCs, you'll get some flavor of this, but I think this is probably pretty good. I think for me, the most important thing is team. So I really believe in backing people, and I'm a very visceral gut investor. I've made a fortune, I've lost a fortune. I mean, but it basically, for me, I have to believe in the team. It's really important. I really focus on not the market size, but what I call the addressable market size. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never seen a business plan that isn't a $1 billion market. If I added up all of the business plans and all the $1 billion markets, our economy wouldn't just be as big as Earth. It would include Mars and Jupiter and other parts of the entire space. So what's important is what is really the addressable market. And how I like to think about the addressable market is I like to thinking about your customer as small, medium, and large, and then trying to figure out how many small, how many medium, and how many large customers are there. So I really focus on a very bottom-up approach to really understanding how big can this business really get. And the reason that's important is because as a venture investor, my goal is to make 10 times my money. So plus or minus, and unfortunately I'll use dollars because I won't be able to convert fast enough in pounds, but it's probably 150% plus or minus difference, so you can do the math. But I mean, I need to believe that a company within a reasonable amount of time can get to about $100 million of revenue for me to generally make 10 times my money. Because the company's going to raise multiple rounds, there's going to be dilution, we're going to give more equity to the employees over time. So trust me, if you run the model, if I can't see in a reasonable period of time your company becoming a $100 million revenue company, it doesn't make sense as a venture investor to make the investment. And by the way, there are companies that aren't venture investments, and that's not bad. Some of my best friends have made more money than me, and they do nothing in tech. I mean, they do mundane things like real estate or laundromats, but they have cash flow that is just inspiring. I'd go crazy. It's not for me. I don't care about the cash flow. I want to build this stuff. But my point is, not every company's idea is a venture investment, but it doesn't mean it's not a great company and a great idea. The other thing too is technology. For me, technology has got to be a barrier, right? I've got to believe that you can somehow use your technology, build some software that's going to give you a competitive advantage. I love barriers to entry. It's hard these days because a lot of the barriers are going down. But even Uber has got a real advantage now, right? Lyft is coming and there are others coming, but being early is really important, and that can be a great barrier to entry. The next one is it has to be a must-have. Like, you don't want to invest in kind of nice-to-haves. So if you're an investor, you really want to think, is this something that people, especially if you're selling to the enterprise, if you're going to build some new product or software that big companies are going to buy, if it's not like the top 5 things that a CIO is worrying about, they're not going to buy it. Certainly not from a startup. So it's really got to be a must-have. And then I really want to believe that you could be number 1 or number 2 in your space. Because if you're not number 1 or number 2, I'm not going to make 10 times my money, right? And I got to make 10 times my money. That's how I get judged. So it's really important to be number 1 or number 2 in your space. So the other thing we do is we really look at and analyze the business model, and I love what I call defensible kind of revenue ramps. So I love to look at the revenue and how you're going to build the revenue and what the cost of acquiring the revenue is. And I really want to understand what the gross margin is. I think when I look at a P&L, the most important number I'm looking at is gross margin. Like, I really want, and it's a test for the entrepreneur. Because if you're a software company, a pure enterprise software company, your gross margins better be like 85, 90%. If you come to me and tell me your gross margins are 20% and you're a software company, then I know you have no idea what you're doing. But on the other hand, and I've invested and made a lot of money in semiconductors in my day, and if you're a chip company, I'd love to see gross margins like 55 or 60%. For a chip company, that's stunning. If you're a service company, then I'd like to see your gross margins be 35 or 40%, not 15 or 20%. So these things, I mean, when you build these business plans, they really matter. I mean, think about it. VCs look at, I don't know how many, thousands and thousands of business plans, thousands and thousands of P&Ls. So I have a very strong opinion. And so I need to have conviction that you understand that P&L and you have conviction. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to hold you accountable to deliver that P&L as your investor. How do we think about management? So, I mean, domain expertise is great. A successful track record certainly helps. Leadership in startups or having been in a startup before, really good. Ability to sell. Every one of you, even if you're an engineer, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to sell. You're selling me as the VC. You're convincing me that I should bet on you, right? And so if you can't convince me to bet on you, how are you going to convince the customer to buy your product? So that's a big part of it for me. Like, I want to be sold to. I want to be inspired. I want to feel your passion. I want to know you're going to wake up every day and battle to win. I mean, to me, that's what wakes me up in the morning and what I want you to feel. I mean, it's very important. And then I think the last one is you need to attract an A team. And he's gonna ask me a question later, I hope, about this thing, which is always very controversial. Should I be the CEO of my company if I'm the founder? And we can have that debate and discussion. It's always a very interesting one. But the most important thing that you can do as a founder is hire a great team, because you can't do it alone. You got to hire a great team. And you know what? It's hard to hire A people if you're a C player. A people want to work with A people. And so that's one of the big challenges that you have to think about. So then how do we conduct due diligence? I'm not going to read all these things. The thing I will tell you is that if I invest in you, I will know more about you than your significant other, than your parent. I'll know your credit score. I'll know if you had a DUI. I will know everything about you. Everything. So you better tell me about it. So if there's anything that happened in the past, tell me, because I'm going to find it. Because I'm going to either give you my money, or worse, I'm going to give you my investors' money. And I'm a fiduciary. I need to know who you are. Can I trust you? And so I'm going to spend a lot of time really figuring it out. One of the things I often do when I make investments is I go out to dinner with like the entrepreneur and their significant other. Like, I want to see how they react to each other. I mean, I want to know, like, what is this person's life? And is that significant other in the boat? Are they in it to win too? Or are they going to be complaining because you're working late and on the weekends you have to do this and you have to travel? I mean, this is hard stuff, right? I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. And so I got to believe, really believe. In the end, it's a funding decision. It's not personal. It's hard for entrepreneurs to understand. I have to be somewhat, which is hard for me, because you can tell from my personality, I'm passionate. But when I make that decision, I have to be dispassionate, right? And what's interesting is in venture firms, you're not just selling to me. It's a really important point. You're selling to my partners. Because what happens in most venture funds is decisions are made by consensus. So one partner can't make the decision. He or she needs to convince all the partners to make the investment. And so what you'll find is you'll wind up meeting with me and some analysts and associates. Maybe I'll introduce you to another one of my partners. But ultimately, you're going to have to sell the entire partnership. So it's a really important part of the process. And then how do we think about exits? So I like to think that every company could go public. The reality is that's the furthest thing from the truth. I mean, in the end, very few companies actually go public. But the reason that mindset's important to me is because if we're going to sell your company to another company, the best competitive advantage we have is the fear that you can go public and you don't need to be bought. If the buyer thinks they have to buy you, then they're only going to pay you a certain price. And then the other thing that's super important is I want to have as many people at the table when it comes time to sell your company. And I'm not very good at many things, But one of the things and I try to say this humbly, but I'm good at is selling companies. And what I've learned, the most important thing is that 90% of the time, you're going to sell your company to a company that already knows you. You will have built a relationship with that company. And then basically they will decide and probably approach you and say, we have this great partnership. You should become part of us. So that means you need to build this ecosystem of companies around you that basically can help you grow your company and be your likely buyers. So the first thing I do after I make an investment is I sit down with the team and we map out the whole ecosystem. Who are all the companies that are in your space? How do they relate to you? Which ones should we form a partnership with? How should we prioritize it? Because that ecosystem is really important. So I'm going to quickly do my lessons learned, and then we're going to jump to the Q&A, and I'll do it fast. So, these slides we'll make available. However, magically it will happen, I'm sure. I don't have to think about it. I guess I have to click them. So, get to profitability as fast as possible. And what's really cool is it's actually much easier to do today than it's ever been, because you don't need as much money. And in a lot of cases, you can get to revenue faster. The reason you want to be profitable is because you then control your destiny, right? If you're losing money, you have to keep coming back to the VC or to your parents or to the rich uncle and asking for more money. And I'll tell you, it's not fun to be in a company that runs out of money. It's just not. And I've been there a lot. Tough to have the call when you go to all the employees and say, hey, this is it, we're done. You don't have a job. It's really hard. So, focus on profitability. Capital intensive businesses are hard. I don't know if any of you are in hardware related stuff. One of my companies is building a next generation battery. So, we had to be creative there. So we found a way. I can't disclose how we do it, but we found a way to leverage other people to build our batteries. We could have never afforded to build out the manufacturing capabilities to build the batteries. It would have been hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So you got to be creative. You got to surround yourself with a great support infrastructure. Banks, lawyers, accountants, advisors, and pay them well. Because there's one adage in life, I believe, you get what you pay for. So, finding the cheapest lawyer is probably not the right approach. You want to find a good lawyer at a reasonable price. This is really important. You got to create a can-do, no bullshit culture. There is no room for bullshit, in a startup. No politics, no hierarchy, right? It's like one for all and all for one, and we're here to win together. And when there is a culture in a startup that isn't that way, I'm virtually certain it will fail. You got to build a world-class board of directors and advisors. And this is something that, it's great. You have lots of successful people that want to work with startups. So seek them out. And there's tons of them in the UK who want to really spend time and mentor you and be on your board and help you be successful. You want to take control of your destiny. A lot of startups will tell me, I'm going to build the product, but I'm going to have someone else sell it. That never works, ever. You got to sell the first 10, 20, 50, 100 customers. Once you've figured out how to do it, then you can figure out how to find a partner to sell the next 500. But they're never going to figure it out. You got to figure it out. So you got to control your destiny. Manage to short-term, well-defined milestones. So I have this vision that I've had for a long time, maybe because in my youth I was pretty crazy. But I think of a startup as a bunch of people pushing a massive boulder up a hill. And if they thought that they had to get to the top of the hill, they wouldn't have the energy or the fortitude to do it. So the hill has these ledges. And the goal is to push as hard as you can to one of those ledges, which is a milestone. Take a breath, figure out where the next ledge is, push again. Take a breath, push again. And everyone needs to know what the ledge is and how to measure the ledge and how we're going to get to the ledge together. So short-term milestones are critical. You need to have in-depth interaction with your customers and your employees. You don't want If the customer tells you they hate your product, you should thank them. They're doing you a favor. If they tell you it's a stupid idea, you should kiss them on the cheek twice, being in Europe. Because you can create a new idea tomorrow and just start again. Why work on a dumb idea that's going to fail for 3 or 4 years of your life, right? You need to hire the best and the brightest. And I think the thing I'm most proud of this company, Pivotal, and I hope you'll feel that today, and like I've said, I've been in many companies. We have the smartest people, and I say that humbly, but I mean, we literally have been able to hire the smartest people I've ever worked with in any company, ever. And I think it's because we've created this culture where people come here. And we don't pay the most, by the way. We don't. But people come here because they want to be here. They come here because they learn. They come here because they're appreciated. They come here because we're very flat. You know, I'm one of the top people in the company. I share my office with 3 other executives. I mean, we're a very flat company. I mean, we that's our culture. And that's what you want to do, is be able to create a place where people want to come and work. And the last, number 1, most important, is cash is king, preserve it at all costs. Cash is like oxygen to a startup. Without cash, you die. Die. So don't buy, you know, and we have a little bit of it here, but we're owned by rich parents. You know, don't buy $600 Herman Miller chairs. You know, don't build palaces. You know what I mean? You know, don't fly business class. I mean, every dollar matters. And you use those dollars to win.